a couple of weeks ago.
You didn't call and ask her to help? That's what she said.
I don't want to interfere with
You said she didn't call and ask?
No, he's lining up. You can sit right there. Masha?
Yeah, I
Right,
she's
right
right
there.
without me, so I figured
Okay.
I didn't need me.
Well, that's a push him.
She's sitting right there. She's sitting right there.
All right.
I should have brought our the Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all you here at our annual meeting at Apponagansett. And we'll open our meeting with a minute of silence. Today, we're very lucky to have the Dartmouth Historical and Art Society here to visit us, and Kathy Plant, and they're going to tell us how Dartmouth became Dartmouth as we know it. And this is Kathy Plant, and Bob Harding is right here, and on cameras, Dan Soja. And they're going to present this program. At the end, we will say our prayer, and we do have refreshments. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. Glad to see so many people turned out. We're going to do just a little history. You may know it. If you learn one little thing, that's great. It's how Dartmouth became Dartmouth as we know it. Next. It says, Mayflower arrives in Plymouth. Sickness takes its toll. Other ships are to follow with more Europeans. Because you had the Mayflower that left Dartmouth, and it came with the Speedwell until the Speedwell got a leak, and then they had to turn back. And then everybody that could fit on the Mayflower continued on. So, the next one. Ship's passengers were religious refugees from Loudon, Holland, hired men from the merchants' adventurers, and crew from the ships. Some of these people will become what are referred to as old comers. So now we have a map that's showing 3 tracts of land. And Dartmouth is number 2, and that's what I was just pointing out. Was given to the old comers by the King of England, Charles I. Now, Charles gave the colonists this, but then they had to negotiate with the Indians. So it was just a formality kind of on the king's part. So this one shows the track of Dartmouth. The Wampanoag Indians deed for what will become the town of Dartmouth in 1664, also known as the Proprietary. Next. So 1654, the Indian deed for the Dartmouth Proprietary was approved and recorded. So it took 2 years before from the time the deed was written up for it to get approved. This is a picture of the deed, and what we're going to do is read what it says. New Plymouth, November the 29th, 1652. Know all men by these presents that I, Wasamiquin, and Wamsetta, my son, have sold unto Mr. William Bradford, Captain Standish, Thomas Southworth, John Winslow, John Cook, and their associates. The purchases are old comers. All the tracts of land lying 3 miles eastward from the river called Kushna. to a certain harbor called Apponagansett, to a flat rock on the westward side of the said harbor. And you notice the spellings that they had. And whereas the said harbor divideth itself into several branches, the westernmost arm to be the bound. And all the tract or tracts of land from the said westernmost arm to the said river of Krishna, 3 miles eastward of the same, with all the profits and benefits within the said tract, with all the rivers, creeks, meadows, necks, and islands that lie in or before the same. And from the sea upward to go so high that the English may not be annoyed by the hunting of the Indians in any sort of their cattle. And I, Apponagansett and Wamsetta, do promise to remove all the Indians within a year from the date hereof that do live in said tract. In consideration hereof, we the above mentioned are to pay to the said Apponagansett and Wamsetta as follows: 30 yards of cloth, 8 moose skins, 15 axes, 15 hoes, 15 pair of breeches, 8 blankets, 2 kettles, 1 cloak, 2 pounds of wampum, 8 pair of stockings, 8 pairs of shoes, 1 iron pot, and 10 shillings, and another commodity. Now, you're figuring, that doesn't seem like very much. But you have to figure, that all had to be brought over with the newcomers, and it was more valuable than what we would think it is. Now, we have a list here of the proprietary of Dartmouth in 1682, and it has all the names. I will circulate a paper after so that you can see if any of your family may be on that list if you've done some of your genealogy. Now, we have Sally Aldrich, who is part of our Dartmouth Historic and Art Society. And she has been doing research on this particular subject for numerous years. So if anybody has questions, Sally is the one to go to. I'm just presenting. Okay. In 1660, the first settlers came about this time, such as John Cook, Arthur Hathaway, John Russell. These men were part of the existing proprietary. Shares or partial shares were being sold and bought. So we had 34 shares that was of that tract too. And there were 36 people that actually owned those shares. And the share really didn't go to one specific piece of land. So it's a whole subject that is so interesting. The town of Dartmouth was chartered by the Plymouth General Court. Boundaries were set in October of 1664. And that's what Old Dartmouth looked like.
Does that include Westport?
Westport, New Bedford, Fairhaven, Acushnet. So Westport and New Bedford, which included Fairhaven, which left in 1812, and Acushnet in 1860, split off from Dartmouth. So this is showing here, everybody knows that is Acushnet, that's Fairhaven, and off. And now this is Dartmouth as we know it now. So,
Thank you, Kathy. One of the interesting results of what Kathy just said was that if you lived in a certain house in the early days, you could stay in the same house, or your family could, and over all the years, you could have lived in 4 or 5 different towns, staying in the same house. I have relatives who did that, and it's kind of an interesting thing. It's difficult when you're doing research in a situation like that. I'm very happy to be here. I think I probably know some of you from high school days, which was a few years ago. We're having our 65th anniversary of our graduation next month, and we've got people coming from all over the country, some of whom I'm sure some of you know, some of whom we haven't talked to for 65 years, but we called them up and they said they're coming, so we're going to have a good time. I'm happy to be able to share with you about our website. Our website is another way that you can learn more about the history of Dartmouth. And I would say a couple of things before I get into the actual website. I think as Quakers, you all realize that Dartmouth was a special place because it was founded by many people of the Quaker faith. The history of this town was very much influenced by the Friends meetings. And I'm from Smith Mills area, and we had 3 meetings at Smith Mills, 3 Friends meetings at Smith Mills. Some of them predated this one. It's no, they didn't. No, I'm sorry, they did not predate this one. But the clerk of the Apponagansett meeting for many years was a guy named George Almy. And one of the things on our website is a study of the house he lived in on Old Westport Road. And he and his wife were very involved in this meeting, as were many other Smith Mills people. The ride to meeting was a very short ride down Lucy Little Road to Chase Road and over here. It's about 6 minutes with a fast pacer, as I'm told. Anyway, we're very proud of our website. Dan here is the man who is responsible for designing our website and maintaining it, and he's done a wonderful job. And if you're into computers, and I know not everyone is, but if you are, or your children are, which is more likely in some cases, you will be able to learn an awful lot about the town, and we continually add new things to this website. What I'm going to do today is to try to take you on a kind of a guided tour. We won't hit everything because we don't have time. It'll get dark before we finish. And I'll try to hit you the highlights and show you a map of how to continue in learning more. But, okay, Dan, we'll push it. Dan is the webmaster. That's what you call the guy who designs it and takes care of it. And he does a great job. This is what they call the opening page. And one of the keys to this, these are all pics off the opening page. If you press on one of those, you'll open another page. And so we're going to sort of walk our way through from the opening home page to the contents page, the events page, and some of these other pages. Most of the important stuff is in the contents and the events page. Events, of course, tells you about what are we going to be doing so you can come and see it. And by the way, we'd be happy to have you join us any time you want to come. Next Sunday, somebody's going to be talking about old clocks, antique clocks, and timekeeping over time in colonial New England. And so you'd be welcome to come to that. The opening page has pictures on it. I'll quickly go into the current events page, which is this events page. And this is a sample of some of the stuff you might see on that page. On June, we had a little program on horse-drawn to horseless carriages, a little history of transportation. And Horace Wiles, some of you might know Horace Wiles, who was 100 years old, came in his 1920 Dodge, and he drove it to the meeting and demonstrated and showed us his old car. Talked about some of his other old cars. And if you haven't met Horace, you better meet him. He's quite a man. This is another typical program where we had selected house histories in Russell's Mills Village, which are just down the street here. And I think we even included, we don't have a picture here, but I think we did talk about the meeting house a little bit. Okay, next slide, Dan. Another one is this is the house where George Almy lived, the clerk of this meeting. And he lived in here. This was built by a guy named Philip Cummings, who was not a Quaker, who was from Rhode Island. A lot of Portsmouth people came over here, as you all know, if you know your Dartmouth history. But this is, and we'll be having another showing of this program. This old house is still there. This is a painting by William Wall, another famous Dartmouthite, who was also a Quaker, I believe. Next slide, Dan. And this is a program about a Quaker, Job Gidley. Everybody knows Job Gidley. Gidley School was named after him. And he did many, many acts of kindness as a Quaker, as part of his mission. You've heard of the Dubakers, the Russian group that he helped get settled in America and helped them get some land out in the West. Went out there for a year and spent time with them. We have a program on that in our website. Next slide, please. This is a typical schedule, and the historical clocks and appraisals, the actual title, we changed the title after we talked to the lecturer, and it's called Timekeepers and Timekeeping in Colonial New England, from the Mayflower forward. We had a yard sale yesterday, and Free Men of the Sea, Pirate Players presentation coming up, and a lot of other nice, interesting things, a variety of stuff. Next slide, Dan. Now I'm going to go to the section of the website called Contents. And this is where we have a bunch of subheadings and then individual items under each subheading. This is the archives area. We have a lot of original source records. I won't go through every one, but we've got Native American historical records, Old Town records, Plymouth Colony records, Mass Bay Colony records, records from the town of Portsmouth. As I said earlier, many people who settled early Dartmouth came from Portsmouth. Some came from Sandwich, like some of the early Quakers came from Sandwich to get away from the persecution in Sandwich. But a lot of the other early settlers came from Portsmouth, and they came mostly to Westport, and some in Dartmouth, but very few in New Bedford and Acushnet and Fairhaven. But so we have a lot on town of Portsmouth records. The colonial laws of Massachusetts, all those original records, we have them on the website. There's a couple of great volumes of work, of research on people of this area, representative men and old families of southeastern Massachusetts. 3 great big fat volumes with pictures in them and all kind of genealogical history and local history. We have them up, you can read them on our website. And there's an article about the town meeting records of Old Dartmouth. We have rescued those meeting records. They're in handwritten form. They've been transcribed, so you can read them better than they were originally. But we have those, and we have them indexed, and you can peruse the old town meeting records of the town of Dartmouth on our website, including when you could get fined if you were late for coming to town meeting, if you're a town meeting member. And you could get 2 cents if you killed a blackbird that was spoiling the corn. Here's a sample of town meeting records from 1680. And these are the transcriptions where the transcriber spelled the words correctly, but then recorded what they had been originally spelled. So these are not the original records as written. They're a transcription of the original records. And the transcriber, who did this for the town of New Bedford, way back when they tried to save the old records. She showed us how sufficient was spelled S-O-F-I-S-H-E-N-T instead of sufficient. Anyway, that's a sample of that. Next slide, please, Don. The next section of contents is called collections. And these are living history lecture series slide presentations. This slide presentation is among the slide presentations that are in here. There are event posters. Every event we've run over the last 3 or 4 years, we put out posters to advertise, and we saved them all. And I could show you every poster. It'd drive you crazy because you've probably seen them posted around town. But that's what we have. And we have a program on remembering Gidley School. Some of you might have gone to Gidley School. And I know several of you were in my class at Gidley School. There was lots and lots of photographs of people in town and families in town. We have house histories and many, many other things in this thing called collections. Here are some of the samples within the collections. These are lectures that have been given by different people. I do a lot of talking. You can guess that I get very hoarse. Though I did the first 4. A fellow named Claude Ledoux has done many talks for us. And Pam, who is here today, also has been a faithful lecturer in our program. Honoring the wisdom of our elders. Last year at the Council on Aging, we honored 10 90-year-old people of Dartmouth, and it was a very popular thing, and we filled up Rachel's, was it Rachel's? Some big place. We filled it up. No, it wasn't Rachel's. It was out at the Narrows. What's the name of it? White's. We filled up White's with family out there to help everybody celebrate. Horace was there, among other things.
You were starting at Rachel's and outgrew
We started at Rachel's, and the crowd got to be too big. They couldn't handle it. We went to White's. But we're going to do it again next year, I believe. Revolutionary War veteran Joseph Weaver. History of Citadel by Jim Costa. Local newspaper man Bob Barboza is on our board. And people don't realize that, but he's been very much into history and poetry. And he's won prizes for his history writing, and he really likes poetry. Remembering Gidley School, I shared things with old classmates and other classes than mine from Gidley School. I was a class of 1949 at Gidley School, when it was really a young school. Albert Lees gave a tour through the Little Compton graveyard, talking about the design of gravestones and stuff like that. Very interesting thing. You all know Albert Lees from Westport. I did a special thing on Job Gidley himself. The Helfand family up on Chase Road, family with 2 brothers, married 2 sisters, and they had like 24 kids between them, all lived in one house. Had a big farm. Now DNRT owns the farm, and we rescued the farm house to save it for posterity. Judy Lund, Pam gave a thing on Roots of Faith in Old Dartmouth. That was a part of a series. There's one more coming up. I'm not sure of the date, September something.
Isn't it Labor Day weekend?
Labor Day weekend. Next one is Labor Day weekend. Perry's Grove, clam bake place that has been going for like 100 years. It's closed now, but right at the foot of Slocum Road.
Yeah, Hathaway Road.
Right near Hathaway Road, right, where the country club parks cars now. But it's been there for a long, long time. Old Cemeteries of Dartmouth, Whaling Museum collections. This is the guy who takes care of all the Whaling Museum artifacts, Jordan Burson. He talked to us about all of what they have and how you can look at their website and find it. And Howard Potter, who was a grave digger who dug some of the graves out here in this graveyard. Judy discovered a journal of his and shared it with us, and it was good. Next slide, Dawn. Now we're in another section of contents called genealogy. And we have a section called Resources for the Beginning Genealogist. If you're just getting into family genealogy, you'd like to have a little guidance and a little help to get started, you can go right there on our website and open up that section. It'll take you by the hand and help you get started. And there's an awful lot you can learn about your family. You'd be surprised of how much information there is available just through the keyboard and on your screen. You might not like the idea that so much is available. Some people are more private than the public allows you to be these days. Along with the family genealogy, John Briggs Sr., a name most of you don't know, but he was one of the early settlers of Dartmouth, and his family owned they owned a couple of shares of the town, and they were proprietors of the town. We have many books here that are part of what's on this website. For example, the Arthur Henry and John Howland family genealogy is right here. We have this whole book. You can read this book on the website if you care to, or you can buy it. It's a reprint. You can buy it. It's a public domain book, and many other books. Mayflower book.
Very good read.
They're all. Here's a couple of more samples. The History of New Bedford, Mass. If it's not there, we're planning to put it there. The descendants of William Ricketson, who wrote the book, is there. As well as several of these families have Quaker connections. The Tuckers, of course, the Russells, the Motts, the Ricketsons, the Gidleys, the Potters. So the Quakers really are very much represented in Old Dartmouth. Next slide, please. In the Living History section, we have articles, photos, and programs from today's storytellers. These are things we've done or have been written by Dartmouth historians. We've got articles on the Weaver House. Joseph Weaver was a militiaman who lived in Dartmouth. He lived in a house that's now on the campus of the UMass Dartmouth. And it's the same house that the Zahler farm was at in more recent years. Zahlers had 12 children in that house. It's less than half of this bay in size. And it's still there. And Joseph Weaver is a guy who, when he was guarding the shore down in Michon Point, got notice that they had to come to New Bedford because the Redcoats had come into New Bedford and burned down the town. And so they marched up from Michon Point on foot, of course, no horses. And when he got when he got to New Bedford, there were some bodies in the street, and there were fires raging up and down the shore, and they helped put out the fires, and he personally lugged a couple of bodies to a place where they could get some help, and two of those people later died, and one of them survived, and he wrote in his application for his retirement from the American Revolution militia all about his experiences then in 1778 or whenever it was, and about what he found in New Bedford when he got there, and what the conditions were after the Brits had raided the city. You know that they came in and marched up County Street and up to the head of the river, and that's where a lot of the wharfs were, and they burned them all down, and they were punished, the Quakers, for supplying some of the patriots with food and stuff. So it's part of the deal. These are all different programs. Westport's Fishing Through the Ages. If you don't know Keuke Macumba, you've got to meet Keuke Macumba. He's over 90 and he still stands up with his braces on and talks without notes for hours on end, and talks with great knowledge and great accuracy about what he remembers and what things were like in the old days. And he'll be talking again soon. David versus Goliath was a talk by some little company in Westport, sued the Russian government for doing some damage to their equipment out in Buzzards Bay or someplace. And he talked about it, and it was great length. I give some stuff on Smith Mills. Memory Lane by Bob Barboza was a newspaper piece. More Perry's Grove. Trolley Cars of Dartmouth. If you don't know Paul Lavasser, he's an expert on transportation who is a Dartmouth guy, and he talks every now and then on trains or trolley cars or horses and carriages and stagecoaches and stuff like that. Great guy. Okay, we also have a section in the contents on land record research. Among other things here are the proprietors' records. Kathy talked about the proprietors as that's who actually owned the land in Dartmouth initially. And they owned shares of undistributed land. They didn't necessarily own that piece or that piece. They had a 32nd or one share of the whole town, of the old town of Dartmouth. One share was probably the equivalent. Nobody ever actually got all of this distributed to them, but one share was approximately 3,200 acres. A little bit of land to have as one share. But those records have been indexed. Dan has been doing a lot of work putting it in an index to those proprietors' records. And the proprietors' records actually describe the land, the meets and bounds, and who's, what creek it's near, or who's in the butter, or whatever. There's a tremendous amount of work that Dan has done, and it is available on our website there, and is continuing to do. Here's a sample of what's in the proprietors' records. Some of it's a little hard to read, but pretty fancy writing. September 12th, 1711. This is when they did some of the measurements of the land. Land laid out for Daniel Sherman on the north side of Jabez Barker's homestead, on the west side of the Apponagansett River. Beginning at a white oak, in something to the south, Jabez Barker. Can you interpret that for me, Dan? What does that mean? What's this? MD? No, that's just the notations. They use their own shorthand in these things, but that's what it looks like. Next slide, please, Dan. Another section of our contents. The contents is where it all is, of course. We have our map room. This is probably the most popular part of our whole website. We had all these old maps that show who lived where in 1856 or 1858 or 1871 or 1898 or whatever. And that's quite interesting because that helps you trace who lived in these houses over time so that you can give a house history that's accurate. And you can go into the records to find what name you're looking for in the records. The map room has a lot of different stuff on it, and I'll just quickly go through some of it. We've got a few samples too. We have a Bristol County map of 1852. That's every town in Bristol County in 1852 with what's called a residential map. It's got pictures of the houses with the names of who lived in them in 1852 when they made the map. And we've got the Dartmouth map of 1852, and we've created something called a grid map with an index. You all remember the old gas station maps, I'm sure of that. Sometimes you get them for free. You can open it up, and there were lines going down and across. And then there was this very fine print index that said you want to look up Hawes's sawmill. It says it's on G2. You go row G, column 2, and in that little box would be Hawes's sawmill, among other things, in Smith Mills. Well, we created that for all these old maps, that grid with the index, so that you can look at the old map and find your family name and where they are, where they lived, and maybe on the map of some other year, find out if they were still there. So it's pretty useful for that kind of work. So we got the Dartmouth 1852. We also have Dartmouth 1856, and that was so big after you blow it up so you can read it, that we cut it into two, top half and bottom half, and we have a grid and an index for both. We also have the village of Smith Mills in 1856 with a grid Next slide. This is a sample of what Smith Mills looks like with a grid. See the lines going up and down? And we even put a legend on it, and we put stars near different kinds of things. I forget what each of those is for, but each is a category. They're like, here's a wheelwright shops. Smith Mills, like Russell's Mills, was a busy place, a lot going on. And this is the Cummings family, of course, owned all kinds of mills and stuff in Smith Mills. And what later became the Hawes Sawmill was right about in here, but it was the Cummings Sawmill before that. The old grist mill that you all remember, Smith Mills, was right about in here. And that was built by John Cummings, who lived in what was called a Seabury House just across the way. It's now a place with a kiosk and a sign and a green space. That's where Mr. Car dealer, Mr. Szymanski. That's right, Russ. I know somebody here would remember Szymanski's yard. It was a pretty messy place, as I remember. Yeah. Anyway, this is a piece of the 1856 map of Dartmouth, and the legend, the blue stars were places of worship, and the cemeteries were in gold stars, and so on. Next slide, Dan. We have many more maps. Smith Mills in 56, Hicksville in 56, South Dartmouth map in 56, Russell's Mills in 56, contemporary map of Russell's Mills, that's today's map today, Dartmouth 1858, 2 years after 56, grid maps with an index. Next slide, Dan. Here's the contemporary map of Russell's Mills, and if I blew that up, you'd see every house with the shape of the lot, how many acres, and who's living there now, and so forth. And of course, that's all the waterways and so on. Dartmouth 1895, Dartmouth street map in 2011, Cushnet 1895, New Bedford Ward 1, Ward 5, Fairhaven 1852, Fairhaven 1895, Westport 1852. Next slide, Dan. This is the town of Dartmouth that Kathy showed you. Next slide is a little closer look. You can get this close, so you can see this is Dartmouth, this is Westport, but you can see all the names of who lived where. There's Captain Gifford and Macomber, Cornell, and all the old Yankee names, Tripp, so forth, Adams, Snell, Soule, Sampson, Francis, etc. And this is what the index looks like. This is a little piece of the index. These are row numbers and column numbers, and these are some of the names or other features of the map. The blacksmith shop is in the grid where 2 and A intersect, and this is in the Westport map of 1852. That's an idea of what the index map looks like. But all the stuff is on this website. Next slide, Dan. And here's more maps. We'll just keep on going. I won't read them all. Just Freetown, New Bedford, Rochester. We're not just doing Dartmouth. If anybody is doing family history, people moved around. They didn't always stay in town. Sometimes the town moved around the person, as we've talked about, right? So, and this is something we've seen. The divisions of Dartmouth, the original Dartmouth, after the first division, this was Dartmouth in red, and this was the rest of the town. Next slide is after Westport was cut off of Dartmouth. That was like 6 months later, 1787. And then back in 1812, New Bedford was cut off of Dartmouth. And then Cushnet and Fairhaven in 1860. Cushnet was the last one to be formed. My father's family was from Acushnet. They got there from Wellfleet. They came there in like 1820, but the original family goes back to Eastham and Wellfleet. Now we go to another section. I know, I tell you, there's a lot of stuff here, a lot of stuff. And you could spend, your husband or your wife will say, now, Are you still at that computer? What are you doing with that computer that's taking so much time? In our reading room, we've got lots and lots of stuff. The old Dartmouth Historical Society sketches were published in 1903 to 1994, and there's like, I don't know, 60 or 70 of them. And they're very, very interesting reading. Henry Worth wrote many of them, who was one of the best historians of the area. And you can read all of those on our website. We get them through a link to the Whaling Museum website, but you can get them through us. We'll help you find them and read them. We have a photo history of Dartmouth villages called the Heritage Trail, which is a terrific thing. If you've driven around town, you've seen some of the kiosks. They're called kiosks. They're boards with pictures in them and explanations. There's one in Russell's Mills Village. There's two in Padenham. There's one in Hicksville. There's one in Smith Mills. They're all over the place. And I'll show you a little bit later as we go. We also have a big section on the Westport Friends meeting and all about Paul Cuffey, who was a very, very important early Quaker who was very famous and did things that nobody else has done. And he was friendly with the English abolitionists. He was very key in moving this country to be fair, a little more fair than they were, in treating blacks and treating former slaves, etc., and so on. We also have lots of historical books. History of Acushnet by Franklin Howland, The Bookshelf of Alice Moss Earle. If you haven't discovered Alice Moss Earle, who published probably 15 different books on colonial America, they're terrific books. Pictures in them of all kinds of pewter lamps and all kinds of stuff. Just terrific, engaging stuff. We have them on our website. You can read them. Yes?
Do you have the books or just the list?
We have the book. You can read the book.
Books.
The books. You're going to turn the pages.
Thank you.
Right, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to have more. Because a lot of old books are in what they call the public domain. It means the copyright is gone. You're free to make them available to the general public, and that's what we do. And there are books that we're interested in. There millions of books, of course. We could drown everybody in books, but we only pick certain ones that we think are particularly interesting.
You've got everything on here, by the way, that Bob was talking about, all the books and the papers and everything. Everything is digitized online, so you can read it.
Yeah.
There's no, it's not just.
And you can make it bigger if you're like I am. You need glasses to read. You can make it a little bigger so you can read it better. It's pretty handy. I know a lot of people are very much in love with hard copy books. I am myself. I got rooms full of them. But sometimes it's pretty convenient to read on a screen because there are certain advantages that you don't have a big heavy book that's going to fall on you when you fall asleep or anything like that. You know, it's good stuff. Also in here is a thing on old Boston, Life of William Bradford, personal narrative of Uncle Tom Jones. This is a story that, as a Quaker, if you haven't read this story, I highly recommend that that's the first thing you do on our website. The Doukhobors were a Russian religious sect, and they were being persecuted in Russia. And Job Gidley teamed up with some other Quakers from Philadelphia and made it possible for them to emigrate from Russia to come here. And when they got here, he met them in New York Harbor, or Boston Harbor, I'm not sure which, and he escorted them out to the Midwest, where he helped them acquire some land, got them started farming, taught them how to build their own houses and do all kinds of stuff, and he wrote about it. And it was published in, I can't remember the name of the Quaker publication that it was published in, but I think it's still going. And we've taken that and put it on our website, the Doukhobor story. If you do nothing else with our website but go read that. It's a terrific read. You'll be proud of being a Dartmouth Quaker, knowing what Job Gidley did back in those days. I know that there are different sects of Quakers, I'm aware of that, and I know he's probably from another group, but Quakers are still all Quakers. I'm sure there's a feeling of pride from what he's done. The House of Delano, some of us from the Historical Society spoke in the Delano Kindred are a family group that's an international group. The Delano family is the same family that Roosevelt, or that Franklin Delano Roosevelt's mother was a member of from Fairhaven. And we attended a meeting that they had in Fairhaven. Dan was there, I was there, and 2 other members of our group were there. And we gave papers on some of the research we've done. And they were very graciously receptive to it and published what we did in their website and so forth and so on. So it's our little group is doing some significant work. This is an international family group that they had people coming from all over the world to this meeting in Fairhaven that we attended. Okay, next slide, Dan. Now this is the Dartmouth Villages Heritage Trail that I talked about. If you haven't seen these around Dartmouth, they're really terrific. Great old pictures and maps. Some of the maps are the same maps we have on our website, because that's where they got them. And old pictures of, these happen to be Hicksville, all relevant to Hicksville. This is Hicksville Panel 1. Next slide, Dan. This is a little blow-up of what that is. Paul Lavasser helped us with that. And this is a map of the village of Hicksville, the train station in Hicksville, and so on and so forth. An old sawmill, an ice house. This is hauling ice and up Old Fall River Road, and so on. Next slide, please, Don. I can't go through all of the different villages of Dartmouth that we have on that particular subset of items, but we have 2 panels for Hicksville, 2 panels for Smith Mills, 1, for Bliss Corner, 2 for Padenham, 2 for Apponagansett Bay, 2 for Russell's Mills, 2 for Bakerville, and 2 for Round Hill, loaded with old historic pictures and interpretations and stuff. And they're mounted in different parts of the town of Dartmouth. But you can see them on our website. You don't have to drive around, waste gas. You know, the old Yankees don't like to waste gas. I don't. You can do it for free on our website, no charge. Okay, another item in our contents is called Studio D. That's Dartmouth. It's D for Dartmouth. And in this part of our website, we have videos of all the lectures that we have videotaped over the last 4 years. So you can, if you couldn't make it, and you were interested, but you had to go see your cousin Susie with your wife or husband, you can still attend the meeting through the website. And it's just one of us standing up talking about some historic thing and sharing pictures. We usually have illustrated talks. We don't just talk. I like to talk, but we illustrate the talks with pictures.
This one will be also on there.
Yes,
today.
this one is also going to be on there, right? Okay, next slide, Dan. Here's some of the things that are there. You've seen us mention these before, but we got an award from the Dartmouth Grange. We're very pleased. The Grange organization in Russell's Mills awarded us Citizen of the Year as an organization for the work that we've been doing. So we're very happy to do that. House stories, The Effects of Route 88 on Westport by Claude Ledoux. Claude Ledoux, former selectman of Dartmouth, and he's been very upset over the years about what happened to Westport when they put Route 88 down, divided all that land, and separated farms into pieces. Next slide. All kinds of stuff. One of our favorite lecturers is a guy named Richard Giffen, a lawyer from Little Compton, who's got all kinds of stuff on the Wampanoag tribe. The Watuppa tribe had a place over near the Watuppa Reservoir, and there are still remnants of that tribe living there not very long ago. And Richard's kind of an expert on that kind of stuff. We have a lot of work on historical mapping, Christmas stuff, Keukenmacumba. Here's a whole bunch of stuff. We had a symposium in Westport on Paul Cuffey with speakers from out of town and really highfalutin, serious scholarship stuff. And it's all the videos. There's like 8 hours of videos there that you can look at the videos of people teaching about Paul Cuffey. Charles W. Morgan at Round Hill, a film from 1923, and a program on the last of her kind. These are all Dartmouth Studio D. These are videotapes where it's like watching the movies. Okay, and here's more of that stuff, all kinds of stuff. The Jovis Weaver House, history of Dartmouth schools. That's kind of an interesting thing, including when the high school traveled from town to town. The high school would be held in Russell's Mills for a while, then we'll go to Smith Mills, then we'll go to Padenham. And Job Gidley came to school as a principal on a horse, was a principal. Next slide, please. We have lots and lots of these, so I'm not going to go through them all. But cemeteries at Dartmouth, Judy Lund, pounding stray animals. Pounding meaning putting into the pound, not abusing them, but putting them into the pound. Animal pounds, we still have one at Russell's Mills, but we located 8 animal pounds in Old Dartmouth, only one of which still survives. We created a map that showed you the location of 7 others. And there are places you wouldn't believe. One, you know where the car barn is in New Bedford, the old trolley barn? There used to be an animal pound right near there, among other places. So, remembering Perry's Grove. Next slide. A religious life in Old Dartmouth. Pam was talking there. Trolley cars of Dartmouth, Paul Levasseur. Research, design, and building of a 19th century reproduction. Simon Willard. Shelf clock was a talk that Dan gave. Dan is very handy with his hands. He's restored a colonial house over on Old Westport Road, and he's built a lot of furniture and things like that. And he gave a talk about this old clock that he did. Fishing out of Westport, past and present, Keukenmacumba. So that's a sample of that. Another section of this videotape, the studio, the Dartmouth Community TV Historical Series. A whole bunch of stuff that you might have seen on DCTV, because that's where it was filmed. Dartmouth Wanderers Tracks Through Our Farm Country. That's really about railroads, and that's Paul Levasseur again. Dartmouth Sawmill, Delano Sawmill, you know where that is, Crossroad, right? Yeah. Yep. And the Delanos, of course, are connected with the same family we talked about. David Gifford, more on Paul Levasseur. Quakers of Old Dartmouth was a talk that was given right here. And Marcia gave the talk. I attended that talk. She sat up high for some. Didn't you have a higher table up here or something? No. Yeah, Marcia and I are classmates from high school. So, we're both going to our reunion next month. We're both recruiting other people to go too. One of the people I heard from, and so is Joanne. Joanne thinks she's hiding over there. She's not hiding. We have people who come from Texas, Colorado, California, Pennsylvania, New York State, and Dartmouth, and all around Acushnet and other local places. And our class has met every 5 years ever since we graduated in 1953. It's the most active class, I think, in the high school history. We have a lot of good stuff. Duval's store right here, see this? Local business, Duval's store. Round Hill. Early water-powered mills of Dartmouth. History of Smith Mill. Monument dedication to Colonel Millett. Okay, that's all of that one. Finally, we have links to other local historical societies and organizations. Dartmouth's not the only town interested in history, and there are a lot of other very good organizations if you like history. And if you wanted to be involved in history, you could be involved in any one of these things. They will welcome you with open arms, trust me. Because there aren't that many people who are interested in history. As much as those of us who like it, there aren't many of us. And so if you'd like to add to somebody's group, feel free to join them. We're continually adding new information to this website. If you'd like to be notified by email of the additions to our site, our library, our archives, our map room, our genealogy room, our projects, our reading room, please add your email address here. In other words, when you're online, if you want to get notification when we put something new up, we'll send you an email if you're registered. And so you can register if you click on, you know, if you use computers, you know, you click on things, things change. You go to another, anything in blue is clickable. And if you click it, you'll get to the next step. Next slide, Dan. These are the other societies that we have links to. There's an alliance, Local History Alliance. Then we have Acushnet, Fairhaven, Freetown, Little Compton, New Bedford, Westport, Whaling City, Martha's Vineyard Preservation Trust. Next slide. Dartmouth Historical Commission. That's the commission, not the society. We're the society. Dartmouth Historical Houses. That's the Macris thing, I believe. Is it, Dan? That's the Macris, the record of all the old houses in Dartmouth. I'm quite sure that.
Yeah.
In the Dartmouth Town Library, a link to the town library, which is another whole bunch of stuff. Rehoboth, the Roach Jones Duff House and Garden Museum. Next slide. Finally, we have a participate, make a donation. You know, we'll take your money if you want to give it. We have a place to either become a member or to send us money if you'd like to help us out. When we have our meetings, we don't charge anything. We suggest a donation, and we have a jar, and people put money in the jar. Some do, some don't. But that's how we survive, and so far we're doing pretty well. The Delanos gave us a nice check for the work we did that is going to substantially add to our website. And Kathy runs yard sales, and we make money that way, and in many other ways too. So we're not into making money. We're into teaching people about the history of Dartmouth and the other local areas.
But we also need the money to
Yes,
pay
we do.
for digitizing maps and so forth to have on the website.
Yeah, one of the projects that's on the back burner, but hopefully going to get moved up. We have an 1871 atlas, great big book with beautiful old maps of all the local villages and towns, like sections of town. They're very detailed maps. So we're going to digitize, which means take a picture of it so we can put it on our website. But it costs money to digitize something that big. If it's small enough, we have our own scanners and we can digitize them ourselves. But if it gets that big, nobody has one. You got to go to commercial people. But anyway, I think that's the last slide. That's the last slide. If there are any questions,